Has Blake Lively put out a hit on content creators? Is the CIA controlling the media? Well, today we're peeling back the curtain and exposing the mainstream media, and we're diving into Blake Lively's smear campaign with somebody that knows a lot more about this world than me. I hope you're ready for it. Let's dive in. You're listening to No Filter with Zack Peter, your go-to source for all the latest pop culture and reality TV tea, served fresh all week long. Now, let's dive in. So we've been covering everything lately from the legal saga that continues to unfold with Blake and Baldoni to these Obama divorce rumors and this alleged affair with Jennifer Aniston. And now I want to dive deeper into the media specifically because I know I've been talking, or at least over the weekend, was really getting into this Glamour article hit piece on content creators. And it has become abundantly clear that content creators are now the target of a lot of mainstream publications. But I also wanted to get into some of the, I hate using the term misinformation, but I think some people are diving too deep into some of these conspiracy theories with how the CIA is involved with Nick Shapiro and Blake Lively and her publicist, Leslie Sloan. So we're going to get into a lot of that and really dive into how the media game works and how these journalists and news industries really operate behind closed doors. But obviously, I can't do it alone. So he's been in the industry for over a decade now. He's a journalist and a podcaster and a good friend of mine. He currently writes for the Daily Mail. Please welcome Jacques Peterson.
Thanks for having me back. This is like the perfect topic for me because I work in the mainstream media. I've been in the mainstream media for a really long time, but I'm actually very, very tapped into independent media. I would say I don't really even read the mainstream media, so I kind of feel like I have a foot in both worlds. So this is perfect.
What is, I guess, before we dive into it, just curious, like, what is your thought on content creators? Because I feel like they're having a moment right now, and it's very clear that there's this disdain for them. I understand it to a degree, but I think the misrepresentation that we're grifters, to me, I mean, because you also are, or you've been part of the content creation world. You've been a podcaster. You've created a lot of content on social media. So, what is your take on this new wave of content creators having a moment right now?
I mean, it's the same as everything where it's like there's good and bad. Like if you look at
Yeah.
mainstream media, there are good journalists and there are crappy journalists and there are journalists that are just doing what their editor is telling them to do. And then if you go into the world of content creators, you have honest people that are out there. They want to seek out the truth. They have become an independent content creator because maybe some of the narratives and the stories that they want to put out there, they can't get out in mainstream media. So they have to go independent to do that. But also, there are a lot of them that are grifters and that are suffering from like audience capture and they're just chasing those clicks and they're saying anything. I'm friends with a lot of influencers, people that are like content creators in terms of like news and people that are just like commentators or influencers or whatever. And it really is just like runs the gamut. Like some of them are fucking grifters and some of them are straight up legit. So I really think you have to look at it as like an individual case by case basis.
Yeah, I think it's so unregulated, right? Where on the flip side with mainstream media, it very regulated, but it's regulated in a way that protects them because we're now learning through this New York Times situation, right? Where it seems like it appears, and this is being alleged by Justin Baldoni's team, is that the New York Times was in collusion with Blake Lively's team to put out this hit piece to take out Justin Baldoni. And there are just a number of inconsistencies in Blake's story that people are wondering, like, how could the New York Times, which is an established publication, run an article with a lot of these, without doing their due diligence of, really looking into her allegations and their argument. And they do have a reporter privilege where their argument is we were given a story, we trusted our source, it was in It was in a legal filing. It was in a CRD complaint that, was filed in California. So, we're basically covered. We reported on the story. We trusted our source. We trusted this legal document. And we basically did Justin Baldoni a favor by even allowing him to comment on the story before it went live. Now, you can also argue, did you really give him an opportunity to comment? You waited until a holiday weekend. It was the end of the week. You gave him a 14-hour window. You gave it, and the window began at 9 p.m. So how much of, a bone did you throw the dude?
Well, it's funny. The New York Times has long been held as like the gold standard of journalism, but I mean, they have been lying for decades. They lied America into, war post 9/11. So for them to, do a little PR piece for Blake Lively is not that controversial considering what they've done in the past. And that is an example of where having content creators and independent citizen journalists, they've served an incredible purpose because they held the New York Times accountable and said, hang on a second, this doesn't add up. This is bullshit. They went and got their own receipts, and now here we are. But, it also goes both ways because I know working in mainstream media, when we have to report certain things, like we'll take it through a legal department. I mean, if you're at a media outlet that
Yeah,
is successful enough to have, lawyers on retainer, and any large enough outlet will, you're going through all these checks and balances, whereas some of these independent content creators are just, regurgitating anything. I mean, on a pop
right.
culture note, right now, I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming out about one of the new seasons of The Housewives of OC, and I'm very like tapped into like what is going on that season. And everything that's being reported is like completely fake, but people can just come out and say whatever they want to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's, I think, where we are kind of in the Wild West, where it's so unregulated. But for me, I tend to err on the side of thinking the audience, for the most part, at least the audience that I feel like I've built, is smart enough to come at things with a critical lens and to, kind of think about it. And at least the content creators that I try to associate myself with too, for the most part, I feel like, we try to put out the information. We don't claim to be the authority. We claim to be more of the conduits to information. That's why a lot of the times we'll share these legal documents, we'll review them live on these shows. And to me, even the New York Times, just the manipulation of how the article was presented to the public. They removed their paywall, which never happens in the New York Times. They made her CRD complaint an easy to download PDF that was like right there. The second you go on the article, you can immediately click it and read the entire CRD complaint for yourself. Which to me, one, I'm like, you can never get a celebrity lawsuit this easy. You can't obtain these legal documents. Like the New York Times doesn't just feed you a whole document and remove their paywall on top of it, and make it accessible at a time frame when people are at home and have nothing else to do because they're at home on a holiday vacation. So there were just too many red flags that poked out to me about the initial release of the article. And then when I was reading through the complaint, now, as you know, I've reviewed a number of celebrity different legal scandals, and the allegations were big, but there was no substance to them, right? They were just claims. And as you and I know, you can make any claim in a legal document. And so what it appeared to me is that the CRD complaint was filed in California, which is not an official lawsuit, but it is a legal document, which then gave Blake Lively the litigation privilege, which means she cannot be sued for defamation because she put these claims in a legal document. However, these filings are confidential. Somehow they just happen to land in the hands of the New York Times, and it happened to be fully published in an article, which then would protect the New York Times from defamation because they were just reporting on this legal document that was filed formally in the state of California.
Yeah, the advice I would give anybody consuming the news, whether it's mainstream media or it's content creators, is to do your own research. And what's
Yeah.
hilarious is that during the whole COVID pandemic, they tried to make that like a dirty phrase of like, oh, people are out here doing their own research, like, what do you know? It's like, no, actually, do your own research
Yeah.
and use your intelligence to figure things out and fact check everything, because you're not always going to get the full story wherever you're going. And you do need to dig up receipts, and you do need to rely on multiple sources. And I think the healthiest way to go about things, and the way that you're best going to get the truth, is a mixture of mainstream media sources, but also these, independent reporters and citizen journalists out there and people like yourself. I mean, you're
Yeah.
going there doing, look, you're a really good example because this is your full-time job and you're taking the time to go through all of these legal documents and to look at any discrepancies. And sometimes at these outlets, I will say, you know, there's different levels of reporters. Like you have people that are higher up that have the time and the resources to like do investigative pieces and do these long features. And then you just have people that have to get the news out really quickly. And
Yeah.
they have article quotas to meet and they have an editor breathing down their neck of like, hey, get this out really quickly. And they don't have the time to do the research. So they're just going to copy what the New York Times says, for example, which is how some of these
Yeah.
narratives can get out there. Whereas you're actually going out there and doing the research, you know?
Yeah. Let's talk about that because I want to get into this. Because I think, and you posted, and this is ultimately what prompted this episode, is you posted this story, this Instagram story online about how people are looking at the similar headlines amongst multiple publications, and it seems like it's orchestrated. And you're saying it's not really orchestrated. A lot of it sometimes, and this is my term for it, is more of just like lazy reporting, right? One media publication, the New York Times, People Magazine, whatever, they report something and then everybody else just picks up on it. And so we have examples like this, where we have page 6, Blake Lively scores a win in Justin Baldoni legal battle as judge grants protective order. And then Deadline, Justin Baldoni loses highly personal, intimate information court battle with Blake Lively. Risk of disclosure is great. Judge warns both sides. Blake Lively wins confidentiality order for sensitive information in Justin Baldoni lawsuit from Variety. So all very much similar, same headline basically, but they're all reporting the same story, and it originates from one publication and then everybody else just kind of copies it because like you said, they have a quota of like 7 articles per day, 10 articles per day, 5 articles per day. So they have to do whatever they can to meet that quota, and a lot of times they're not doing that investigative work themselves.
Yeah, and jobs in the media, the mainstream media, are being slashed constantly. I mean, there's budget cuts all the time. I mean, the entertainment industry overall, like production companies, news outlets, everything, jobs are always slashed. So everyone is like really under the pump to get stories out. And guys, everybody listening, do not go off of a headline. You need to read the entire article from top to bottom because a headline is generated to get you to click. It is clickbait a lot of the time. It's competitive because you have so many outlets that are reporting the same story. So different outlets are trying to have the best headline to get you to click on that. And also, like, I think people don't realize how much of mainstream media is literally dictated by like SEO trends. Like you're
Yeah.
getting reports back of like what are the keywords that are trending on Google right now. And there's also like you will get favored more in the Google algorithm if you get the story out faster. So people are like
Yeah.
rushing to get it out first. So it's like you always need to read the entire article. Then if that article that you're reading isn't actually the source, so say you're reading it on page 6 and they're like Variety reported ... click Variety, go to the Variety article and then see what they say, and then that Variety article might source something else. So like you've
Yeah,
got to
a
do
lot
a
of the
lot of
times
you
they do. According
yeah,
to
you've
Page
got to
Six, according to People, according to the New York Times. And it's literally the article that they're writing, but they're attributing the information to somebody else. So that if there is any ramification about the inaccuracies in the article, they can pass the buck off onto the original publisher.
bingo. So it's like
But
it's a
so
lot.
this,
It's a lot to figure out what's true or not. You've got to kind of actually do a lot of work, and that's why people rely on people such as yourself. Because look, people are like working jobs. They've got kids.
yeah,
They've got a lot on their plate. They don't have the time to do the deep dive, so they're relying on content creators like you. I know you do an amazing job, and you're factual with it. I think there are other people that truly just go for a sensational thing to get clicks and stuff. So that's kind of back to my earlier point of like not all content creators are the same.
yes. But so my point about these headlines, because I posted this, and I posted the similarities in these headlines amongst these different publications, which yes, could be an element of people just ripping each other's headline off. But my point is, a lot of the coverage of this case is very favorable to Blake Lively. All of these headlines make it seem like Blake Lively had some novel win in court when I kind of explained it's not really a win for her. Like, yeah, technically you can say, oh, Blake Lively won, but she didn't really win anything because what she won was like the bare minimum that she was really just kind of like asking for. Like, she wanted, her basic argument was like, oh well, I want a protective order over my, she wanted a blanket protective order, which is the strictest attorney's eyes only type of protection that you can have when the discovery process begins. She wanted that, and the judge is like, well, why? And she's like, well, because I don't want my medical records to get out, which normally, like, your medical records aren't going to get out regardless, like they're irrelevant to the case. But so the judge said, okay, fine, I'll give you your extra sensitive protective order for your medical records. And so the media then misrepresented that as a major win for her in court. Now, the reason I think that they're favoring her is not so much about Blake Lively directly, and you may disagree with me on this, but I think it has a lot more to do with Leslie Sloan, who's her publicist, who's a very powerful Hollywood publicist in, in Hollywood. She's with Vision PR, very big PR firm here in Hollywood as well. And so my thing is, I think they want to make sure that they maintain the relationship with Leslie Sloan to not piss her off, even though she is part of this lawsuit with Blake Lively. They want to make sure it's not that they're appeasing Blake Lively, maybe Ryan Reynolds to a degree, but I think they want to appease Vision PR and Leslie Sloan so that they can still have access to their other high profile clients.
That definitely could be true. I mean, that's how a lot of news media works, which again is why you can't, like, I'm talking about political news, is
Yep.
why you've got to be very careful, whatever side, if you're watching left wing news or right wing news. So much of that is access journalism where they don't want to criticize one administration because they want to be able to get in the press room and they want to get those exclusives. So that applies to celebrity journalism as well. That very much could be the case because, in all my years in the industry and then just people I've known, that absolutely does happen. You don't want to lose access, but I've also been on the other side of it where it's like if you've got a good story and it's going to get clicks and it's the truth and it's a great story. You don't give a fuck if the publicist kicks up because the publicist is always going to kick up a fuss. I mean, you would not believe some of the things that a publicist will nitpick. Like it's actually kind of insane. You can't even believe it. And you're not always doing what a publicist says. I'll also say, to play devil's advocate, I'm good at doing a headline. And if I was the first one to get that story, the one that you just referenced with, Blake had a win and you're saying she didn't really have a win, I probably, well, look, I won't use myself. I'll say if you're a good journalist and you want to get clicks, you would say Blake got a win because all over the internet, I would say most of the content creators, right, and most of the general public that are following this are Team Baldoni. And if you're watching a boxing match, okay, say Mike Tyson versus fucking Jake Paul or whatever, you don't want to watch one person just obliterate the other one. You want to watch it like close. You want to be on the edge of your seat. So it's actually more clickable to make it look like Blake got a win because you're like, oh, wait, what? This is evening out now? Because really, as it's been playing out, it started out where everyone was Team Blake initially, and then more evidence started coming out. It really shifted over to Justin Baldoni. It was like, wow, like Blake is just getting buried every day. So then to see it swing back of like Blake Lively gets a win, you're like, wait, what? Oh, that's like a lot juicier. You're going to click on that. So that could be part of the motivation as well.
Is to just what, have a contrarian voice to capture the attention of the audience?
Yeah, it's to get a click. It's to get a
Well,
click and to get people to read the story.
which is interesting because there's this attack on content creators right now, and we're being accused of clickbaiting, and we're being accused of trying to drive clicks so that we can make money. There's this editor at Glamour magazine who went and did this article. Her name is Stephanie McNeil. And she did this whole piece called Inside the Blake Lively Hate Campaign Fueled by Mommy Sleuths. And it's just so funny to see a publication that prides themselves on being for women. And then they literally go and write an entire article attacking working women that also happen to be mothers. So I'm like, the irony and the hypocrisy does not fall flat on me. But then this woman, Stephanie McNeil, went on to then post a whole video on her Instagram account, which then she took down, and then she reposted it on TikTok, or she posted a new version on TikTok, and then the deleted version from Instagram, she reposted it on Instagram because people called her out for it. But so she was basically saying that she doesn't have an incentive to deceive the public. That if anything, content creators have the incentive to deceive the public because they're the ones that are driven by money. They're sleuths and they're grifters because the more clicks that they get and the more controversial they are, the more that they can drive up their revenue.
Yeah, so I watched her video and one point she made was like, look, all of these content creators, they're driven to get clicks because they're going to get more revenue and they're probably making more money than me. Whereas if 10 people click on my story or 10 million, it doesn't matter. I'm still a salaried employee and nothing changes. She's full of shit because, like I said, companies, magazines, news outlets are doing cuts all the time. So if your stories are bringing in 10 clicks, when they do the next round of layoffs, you're first in
You get
line.
fired.
So yeah, you're not trying to have a flop article, okay? You're not like, sorry, like they don't have the budgets that they used to have. So that's one thing. I read her piece and it was funny because the first part of the article I actually agreed with. So she kind of made a point of she was picking out a lot of these, she calls them mummy sleuths, basically these mummy bloggers, and how they're pretty toxic and they're just overly nitpicking everything to do with Blake Lively. And she pointed out the Another Simple Favor premiere and about how these women are just going, oh my God, she's such a narcissist because she wore this dress. And it was just like ridiculous. It's kind of like Reddit type of stuff, which
Yeah.
women do a lot of this. I mean, you go on fucking Reddit and it's just a bunch of women just hating on. I mean, they have all these snark subs, Kardashian snark,
Yeah.
Bravo snark, and it's literally just women just hating and tearing down other women, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I get ripped apart in the
Oh,
Reddit snarks
yeah,
all the time.
these people are completely insane and off the hook. So when I'm reading the start of the article, I'm kind of like, well, I agree with her, but then you keep reading and it's just a completely one-sided piece kind of defending Blake and saying that anybody that criticizes Blake Lively is a right-wing misogynist and how terrible that is in, the Trump administration when women's rights are at risk or whatever. And I'm like, well, girl, you're just doing a pro-Blake thing from a left-wing perspective. So,
Yeah.
but you're angry that there are people supposedly doing anti-Blake from a right-wing perspective. Like, how are you any better than any of them? Like, the lack of self-awareness. At least write this in a balanced way. So yeah, the article was ridiculous. And then of course she goes on Instagram and plays the victim because she's getting trolled now.
Well, it's so interesting because she goes into the premiere of Another Simple Favor and she talks about, how we refer to ourselves as experts and how, she says right here, in fact, one fan seen taking photos with Lively, they claim, is actually the wife of the film's director, Paul Feig. And it's so funny because I have the image right here, which I will show you. And it actually is Paul Feig. He actually is the one, or sorry, it actually is his wife, and she is posing for a photo with Blake Lively. And I'm like, you, as the journalist, should very easily be able to identify his wife right here in the selfie line taking a photo with Blake Lively. And why would she be in the selfie line when her husband is the director of the film? If she wanted a selfie with Blake Lively, she has numerous opportunities to be able to get that. And then she goes to say that the internet was going off and talking about how all of these there were all of these protesters outside and how all of these protesters were let me see if I can pull up this one. There's one photo of this one woman. Her name is Kristen Kurtz. She goes by the name Colonel Kurtz, and she was one protester that was outside of the Another Simple Favor premiere. And she's already come out and she said, I basically did it as a joke. I wasn't expecting the media to pick up on this. And like she laughed. She shared and then laughed about how like it became such a thing and it got picked up in Variety. And so there's one photo of one person that's holding up a sign and she's come out and she's like, I literally went to like troll. Like I was kind of just being a troll and I thought it would be funny and I didn't realize it would get picked up the way that it was. I wasn't trying to be, some like rah. I wasn't trying to like have a movement here, but it's just crazy to me that this is how it's being spun, that these are all fake things, when it's like, well, nobody's saying that there was a flood of protesters. There was one protester. There's a photo of her. She's already spoken about this, and this is all information that's very easily accessible online. The Paul Feig wife thing is very clear. You see the photos of Paul Feig's wife, the director. His wife is in the selfie line. Like that's not false either. But there are a number of different things that she brings up that could very easily be fact checked in this article, but she makes it seem like these mommy sleuths are so crazy and wacky before she then goes into us being part of this right wing agenda. And she references Candace Owens and Jessica Reed Krause from House and Habit, and how these are all women that are taking advantage of the right wing agenda to, I don't know, help Trump grab them by the pussies. Like I don't really know what the point is.
Yeah, I mean, this journalist clearly has an agenda of her own, because it's like, there's no way it's only right-wing influencers that are covering this. I mean, everyone's covering it. It's the biggest pop culture story. So it's just funny that there's this huge, especially there's a huge fixation on Candace Owens covering it. People are so upset by that. And then as far as her point goes about, the mummy sleuths online just nitpicking everything and being trolls, which they are being, but it's like, mainstream tabloid media does that all the time. Like Glamour magazine may not, but like look at a supermarket tabloid. I mean, remember all of the Star magazine, like
Yeah.
pictures of people on the beach with cellulite. And whenever, we lived through tabloid culture through Britney and Lindsay and stuff. When that stuff was like newsworthy, it was like every single week just beating the shit out of them of like nitpicking everything and sensationalizing things. So like, I don't endorse I don't endorse anybody doing that, but the mainstream media has done that as well. It's not just mummy sleuths doing it. So
But
again, that's just like a
yeah.
one-sided article.
Also, and like, what a joke, because like Glamour is like the one place that's going to be like, you want this lip gloss because Taylor Swift loves this lip gloss. And by the way, we happen to get a kickback on it. But guys, buy this lip gloss because Taylor Swift happened to have been caught conveniently by
Totally.
the paparazzi walking out of this. Like, they do so much of this sensationalized clickbaity content that to me, it's just laughable. And then The Cut went and posted a whole hit piece on Candace Owens specifically. Like, the media is so fixated on Candace Owens right now and making her the face of the pro Baldoni movement, which, if you know anything about Baldoni, at the beginning, I was skeptical of him because I'm like, he really seems like some woke, fake feminist that,
Mm.
is just trying to be like, take down toxic masculinity and rah women, and just like one of those like obnoxious dudes. And he is the last person that ever would want to be associated with Candace Owens, because it just, their politics, I'm sure, would be completely polarizingly different. But the fact that, and I'm kind of seeing how there are so many people in our country right now that are united by whether, you're right wing or left wing or whatever, whatever your background is or whatever your beliefs are, everybody's kind of uniting to at least see that Blake Lively is kind of the common enemy, and or at least just being not fully transparent in these allegations that she's made against Justin Baldoni. And it's just interesting to see the media continue to want to pit us against each other by turning this into a political issue.
Yeah, look, in the mainstream media, especially the American media specifically, it's so divided politically. And most of the writers at these outlets, like a Glamour magazine, it is a liberal white woman of a certain age. And yeah, I think too much of their own personal politics are influencing how they're covering this. So they're hyper fixated on Candace Owens covering this case, which is, I mean, I read the article about Candace Owens, and it is kind of interesting how she's like pivoting from doing hard politics into pop culture commentary. I don't know if it's such a huge conspiracy. I actually think she's a really smart businesswoman for it because, I was talking about this recently with a friend, and I was kind of going off on and criticizing a lot of the conservative commentators. And I used to listen to a lot of them like many years ago. And I was kind of like, they've gotten so lazy now. It's just the same, like, Oscars so woke rant peddled every year, word for word, Megan Kelly, etc. They're all doing the same shit. And I was like, at least Candace Owens is coming from things from a different perspective. She's doing Blake and Baldoni. She did this Brigitte Macron is born a man, whether you believe that or not. It's at least she's doing something that nobody else is doing. And you're kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, what's that? And now she's doing this Harvey Weinstein thing, and people are really kind of upset by that. I've been listening to the Harvey series. It's definitely making me look at the case differently. And she's not defending Harvey Weinstein, saying that he's a great guy. She's still like, he's a pig and he's a bully and all of these things. She's just saying that, like, the version that you were presented of how this case played out is not reality. So I don't know. I think she's coming up with better ideas for content than a lot of people in the mainstream media. Like, you know what? If I was fucking working at Glamour magazine, not that they would ever let you, but like, yeah, go try and pitch. Let me do a reappraisal of like Harvey Weinstein. Let's like re-examine this case and see if there's a different angle to it. It's interesting, but either they're not creative enough to do that, or their woke editors above them are like, oh, no, you absolutely couldn't do that. So then Candace is out here doing it and she's getting millions of views, and like, good on her.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what it comes down to is the editors have control. And I told a story this week on the podcast about this article that I did about weighing myself and the scale and how they wanted me to get an MD to comment on the story. And I did. And then they saw her Instagram and saw that she made a post about the inefficacy of masks during COVID. And they were just like, we don't believe in that. And so we're not going to have her participate in this story. And they removed her quotes from the article. And it's all very and my pushback to it, which obviously I had no control over it, my editor was my editor, but my pushback to it was like, but wait, she's a doctor, she's an expert, she's an MD, you're an editor, you're a nutrition, you're a food editor. Like, what credentials do you have on the efficacy of, spreading viral particles? And, especially if she's like showing why her position is the way that it is, and she does have a medically sound background, so her opinion does carry weight. Like, why does her opinion carry less weight than your opinion? And we're seeing the misrepresentation in journalism at that time. Like this week, a big conversation is the Wuhan lab theory that was suppressed in the media and was peddled as a conspiracy theory and has now just become widely accepted, and people are just like, oh, okay, we just didn't know. It's like, no, a lot of people did know and we're trying to say it, and it was intentionally being suppressed. Like, it's not like we just didn't know, you weren't allowed to say it.
Yeah, and the New York Times, how many years later, 2025, they're like, "Oh, we were misled about the pandemic." Well, you actually, the New York Times misled people. And
Yeah.
dude, trust me, like, I started off this episode saying that I'm in a unique position because I work in the mainstream media and I've been in it now for over a decade in, various outlets and avenues, and done radio and all different kinds of things. And I listened to so much independent media from all sides of the political spectrum. And I was very early on um, calling BS on a lot of the COVID narratives that we were being fed. But working in the mainstream media, I mean, you could not it was, the groupthink was out of
Yeah.
control. And I was treated like a fucking lunatic by like they treated me like I was a conspiracy theorist nut job for saying the most like innocuous kind of things about it. And it was
Yeah.
just really crazy. I never got like an apology or anything. And to your
They
point
won't.
before, saying about, the editors control things, you and I, we won't go into details, but you and I had discussed, you had an idea for a story that you wanted to
Oh
do
yeah.
from your perspective. And I wanted to hook you up with a media outlet because I recognized that it was a great story. And I kind of tried to use some of my contacts to pitch it for you. And they declined, which I was kind of surprised. And then I was like, sorry. And I think you had tried to get it to a few places. And then you ended up just doing it as an Instagram reel. And of course, it went viral. And it was because it was an amazing story. But it's like, if an editor of different if the editor of these publications just says no for whatever reason, maybe they don't have good news judgment, maybe they've failed upwards in their career, maybe there's certain reasons they don't want it out there, who even knows, they have final say. So the editors don't know everything.
No, they don't. Well, and the funny thing is, I haven't gotten confirmation, but I did have a contract, and technically, I'm still under contract um, with a big media organization. I won't say which one, but I had a contract with them, and it was for like a commentary hosting gig, and I did it with them for about a year and a half, and then suddenly my contract was abruptly put on pause, and I never was given like a real reason as to why. But I also was not allowed to fulfill the rest of the duties of my contract, which also meant I wasn't allowed to collect the money that was left in my contract. And to this day, I have still not been able to collect the money on that contract, which, think about it, when you're independent like me and you have a gig that's technically secured in your mind, and suddenly your contract just abruptly gets put on pause without cause, you're depending on that paycheck that you're expecting to get for however many months or whatever the time frame is. And then suddenly you don't get an answer, and they won't tell you why, but they won't release you from your contract, and they won't let you work, and they don't want to pay you. And so you're like, okay, maybe it's a budget thing. And then now I just saw this week that a housewife suddenly got a new podcast that was announced with that same network. And I was like, wow, so we do have a budget, and we could have very easily worked me and allowed me to get paid. And for whatever reason, we've not allowed me to fulfill my contract. And I'm still in that contract. They would not release me. They relieved me of my confidentiality, so at least I'm allowed to work elsewhere. But it's crazy that, like, I just to this day have not been given a reason as to why I was the only person at that network that was paused when everybody else, whether they were employed or contracted, continued to be able to work except for me.
Well, it's funny that you bring up a housewife getting a podcast, because I saw like a bunch of housewives and Bravo celebrities have just announced new podcasts. And it's amazing how many people running these fucking huge podcast networks have no clue, because it's like, what just happened to you, right? You got stiffed on a contract. You bring in more listeners and engagement than a housewife does, because you've been doing this for so long and you have an engaged
Thank you.
audience that come in for your opinion. Whereas just because you are on television does not mean that you are going to have a hit podcast. Like, yes, for the most part, they usually get listens on like the first episode. And the way the algorithm works is when you get a bunch of new subscribers, you go up in the chart. So it looks like the show is like bigger than it is. But these shows never last, because they're just giving anyone that has a name a podcast, but they can't actually bring in the listeners. And these networks don't understand the value of people like you all the time. They just get blinded by like a celebrity and that quick hit that they think they can get from that. And also, I had an experience with a very big podcast network that had it was a celebrity hosted show, and I was friends with the celebrity, and they had wanted to get me on the show, and I was all booked on, and then it abruptly didn't happen. And they were like, they gave some bullshit reason. I can't remember. And I
Yeah.
kind of believed them. And then I found out later that I hadn't been allowed to do it because the producer on there had seen my social media, and because I had posted like um and anti-COVID stuff, or again, like, the lab leak and all the stuff that is now factually true and everyone admits is true. But because I had posted that, they were like, he can't come on here. As I mean,
Which,
we weren't gonna talk about fucking COVID. It was a pop culture podcast. Like, we were just gonna
yeah.
talk about celebrity news. But that person
Which,
didn't
by the
like me.
way, that person didn't like you, and that person also is the one that would not allow me to work. It was the same network that you and I are talking about. So it's just, when they say that these things aren't politically driven, or that there aren't some sort of personal biases that influence them, it's absolutely within the realm of possibility. I'm not making that accusation, but I'm saying it's absolutely within the realm of possibility, because these people that make these decisions usually allow their own personal biases to affect their judgment. And people don't realize that. They think that there's an ethical standard, a gold star standard that these organizations should be upheld to, that you would expect them to if they're a big company that, for whatever reason, they are allowed to get away with these things.
It's amazing when you get into the industry, right? And you peek behind the curtain and you just realize how fucking stupid most people are. Like the level of incompetence and like bias and everything that the people have, it is bewildering. And you see certain people that get further in different companies and outlets and everything, and it kind of like blow. I mean, you and I have plenty of conversations off air, and yeah, it's, people, I think people on the outside have a certain perception of things, and then you like get in there and you're just like, it's like we
Yeah.
were talking before about all the articles, and people have these conspiracy theories of like, oh, they're being paid off by Blake's team or whatever. It's like, no, it's just like some journalist that's trying not to get fired that has to be the first one to get the story up. So they're just copying and pasting what page 6 wrote. Like, it's not that deep. These aren't the
Yeah.
brightest people out there.
Yeah, sometimes it really is not that deep, but sometimes it is. I want to get your opinion about this CIA dude, Nick Shapiro. But before we do, I want to give some quick love to my pals at Factor. Ready to optimize your nutrition this new year? Well, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so that you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fully fresh and prepared, perfect for any lifestyle. Whether you're busy or active, you can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Results will vary depending on your diet and exercise, but you have 40 options across 8 different dietary preferences on the menu each week with easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I'm on the Protein Plus. I'm trying to bulk up a little bit, trying to be ready for summer. I've been loving it. All the meat, all the chicken and the pork. I've been clocking it. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab and go snacks, and more add ons that you can check out. Reach your goals this year with ingredients that you can trust and convenience that you just can't beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factor podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/factor podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. The link and the code are in the description below. Cash in those savings with Factor today. All right, I want to know what your thoughts are about this Nick Shapiro dude who's former CIA. He used to be part of the CIA. Now he's an independent freelance consultant. If you dig into him, you'll see he's done work for Airbnb and has helped them come up some of the crimes that have happened at different Airbnbs to make sure that their press is not negative and they, continue to save face. So he's very clearly great at crisis PR. Blake Lively has now hired him. He often gets referenced. That Stephanie McNeil, glamour editor, made it very clear in her video that she's not being hired by the CIA to take down Justin Baldoni. What are your thoughts on the CIA dude?
Very scary stuff. Also common in Hollywood when you're at that level of power. People run around with some real heavy hitters. And the relationship between like the CIA and Hollywood is not new. I mean, a lot of the American films that we watch, the war films, they get they're influenced by the CIA and the Pentagon, and a lot of it is propaganda and special interest groups to put certain messages out there. A lot of like pro-war stuff, especially coming out of America. So to hear that people at the level of like a Ryan Reynolds and a Blake Lively are working with some scary CIA person, not a shock to me. And I'm sure many other celebrities are. I mean, even back in the day, like Frank Sinatra and stuff, like he was like connected with the mob. There are a lot of
Well,
celebrities out here.
I think was it Angelina Jolie that also worked with Nick Shapiro when she was battling Brad Pitt in their whole divorce.
That would not surprise me. I've definitely heard some things about Angelina Jolie, and yeah, well, I won't say anymore, but I've heard some things.
I don't know. I'm trying to think if that's true or not true. Yeah, it says Blake Lively hired the CIA dude. I feel like somebody told me that Angelina Jolie also hired him when she was fighting Brad Pitt. She hired some sort of like big wig crisis PR team to, take shots at Brad Pitt. But I mean, these things have happened for years in the media. And I think, if anything, it's just now being exposed. Like, Blake Lively has kind of come and pulled the curtain back, and we're finally starting to see Oz. We're in the Wizard of Oz, and we're now starting to see the man behind the curtain. And but like, people don't realize how much these games. I mean, look at Rose McGowan. She talked about it, how when she tried to speak out against Harvey Weinstein, she was often silenced and she was attacked and whatever. And like,
She had
hello.
Mossad after her, the Israeli CIA, on behalf of Harvey Weinstein. So it's like,
Okay,
yeah, these things happen.
but you know what's crazy? Who represented Harvey Weinstein? Leslie Sloan at Vision PR. Who currently represents Blake Lively and is dragged into this lawsuit? Leslie Sloan of Vision PR. So Leslie Sloan doesn't seem to have her hands all too clean. And again, all Blake Lively has done is really just taken the black light and shined it on Hollywood. And now we're all starting to see how messy and ugly things are. And the underbelly is now coming to the surface.
Well, we got a bit of a taste of it with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff when you're seeing all these
Yeah.
celebrities that were there, and now we're finding out that, they were most likely being lured and sleeping with these underage girls and then having it filmed and being used for blackmail. So, there's a lot going on. I do want to say though, like, there's two sides to it. Like, yes, there is the side with like the CIA and the mobsters and Mossad and all of that craziness, but like sometimes it also just isn't as deep as people think. And I think that's where, like, yes, the mummy sleuths, etc., can go off the deep end a bit because they do go down these rabbit holes too much. And like, now being here, and I hear a lot of gossip and stuff, and it's not always a conspiracy. Like, sometimes it's not as interesting as you think that it is. So again, it's a case by case basis.
Yeah. So what is your take on Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni with, kind of everything that you've seen come forth so far?
I mean, I'm definitely, team Baldoni, but I think they're both quite insufferable. He's very annoying. She's awful. But I think the reason that this case has connected with people so much, well, one, it's very juicy just because you are, like you said, peeling back the curtain and seeing a side of Hollywood that not everyone gets to see. So it's interesting just to like look at all the behind the scenes stuff there. But we've all been, if you're just like a normal working person, everybody has been in a position, whether you're working in a cafe or a corporate environment or whatever, where you've probably been bullied by somebody that is higher up than you or has more power in the company than you do, and makes, ridiculous decisions based off of their ego or their own, career advancement, and keeps you under. And I just think it's so relatable for so many people. And I
Yeah.
think that's why people have really connected to this, because people are able to see themselves in this situation.
And feel like Blake Lively is not the proper representation of what it means to be harassed in the workplace, because it's something
No.
that's so prevalent and happens like genuinely. And the thing is, there are women in the workplace today that are being harassed by their bosses that can't fight back, and they have to kind of just take it, and they know that HR might not protect them because HR's best interest is in protecting the company, not their employees. And so they know they have a boss that genuinely has power. You go on a set like It Ends With Us with Justin Baldoni, who's virtually this nobody that I'd never heard of before any of this, and you're going to tell me he had more power over Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds? Like, come on. In what
Yeah, that's
world does
just
that
not
make any
how it
sense?
works. That's not how it works. And also, like, people are very into this too because culturally we've just had a shift. Like, America is just full of extremes. So we went through this period of like extreme wokeness, extreme political correctness, cancel culture. Now we're experiencing a huge backlash to that. So, I think people are connecting to this because they feel like this is the kind of anti Me Too story where, a woman has tried to paint herself as a victim and she actually wasn't, and the man is a victim. So I think just kind of where we are culturally is fueling a lot of the interest in this as well. And then We'll swing back. Like, it would be nice
Yeah.
to think that we're going to get to a middle ground where people are just going to look at things kind of factually, but I don't think so. I think we're just in for just extreme swings to the
Yeah,
left
it's
and the
always
right
gonna
for the
go back
foreseeable
and forth.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna go super right, and then it's gonna go super left again, and it's gonna go super right again, and like we're just gonna keep going back and forth, and that's just how, the culture moves. I don't, as much as it would be nice to have some sort of middle ground. I don't know if we can. I just feel like the culture is so sensationalized that they're always gonna blow it and take it as far as they can one way or the other. But why don't you think the media is willing to cover Blake Lively in an honest or unfavorable way?
I mean, I don't think people haven't covered it. I think I mean, yeah, I'm at the Daily Mail. We're a huge outlet and we do plenty of stories that are negative towards Blake Lively constantly. So, but again, I think it's kind of like, what political affiliation does the media outlet have? If you're kind of like center right, if you're like a New York Post or some
Yeah.
of these other outlets, you're probably going to go more Baldoni. Um, and then if you're like a Glamour magazine, you're probably gonna, you're that chick working at Glamour, you're gonna be like pro Blake. I think just people's kind of political bias is influencing how they cover this, which is, unfortunate because it should just be based on the facts of it. But, you know, there's alternative facts now. We're not in a fact-based culture.
There's the what is it? The in the UK, what's there's this documentary that aired on Monday that aired last night, Monday, March 17th. It's called He Said, She Said, Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. And I guess it was their fair coverage of the case. I'm told it was leaning more towards very pro Blake, but I'm also told that I was in it. And I'm like, wait, why?
Oh.
I was like, why didn't anybody tell me that I was in it? It's like nobody asked for my release. Um,
Hmm. Maybe they don't need to in the UK. Who
no, I
knows?
don't think they need to. I mean, if it's a social media post or something, they really don't need to. As long as they credit you, it's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, you'll be surprised. Like some of the things we're not allowed to post. I'm like, really? Can't we just take their TikTok? And they're like, no, we need, permission. I'm like,
well,
okay.
like the Netflix they did the Amber Heard Johnny Depp Netflix series where they covered the trial, and they used so many different like YouTubers and their video clips in that series, and they didn't ask them for permission or get a release from them, which I thought was strange. I mean, every time Bravo uses a clip of my podcast and it's my voice or it's my image or whatever, like I have to sign off on that every single time. Like it's never much of a surprise to me, even if it's like a 3-second soundbite of my voice.
Well, my friend Shalon Lester, who used to be the editor of Star Magazine and now she's a YouTuber, she was featured in that Meghan and Harry Netflix series. And they
Oh yeah,
actually did kind of what they're doing now to the people that are criticizing Blake. They tried to paint out that everybody that criticized Meghan Markle was
it's
you know,
racist.
yes, was a racist mummy sleuth, a troll, part of a coordinated campaign. And where did those balloons come from on did you see that?
It's like an auto thing. Like when you do a certain gesture, it'll do like a thumbs up or it'll do balloons. It's so
Okay.
weird when it does that. It auto does that. Mine gives me it always has the little pop. It's like, do you want to have auto reactions? I'm like, no, I don't want to have whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah,
No, thank
guys, if
you.
you're listening and you're not watching on YouTube, balloons just flew across my screen. But what I was saying was my friend Sean Lester, she got put in this group of, hateful racist trolls just because she criticized Meghan Markle on her YouTube account. And like she took legal action against them
Yeah.
because she was like, you're not going to say that I'm part of a coordinated troll campaign that was hired to take down Meghan Markle when I'm literally just an independent commentator giving my opinion on Meghan Markle on my own fucking YouTube channel. So yeah, this is not the first time there's been kind of hit pieces against the mummy
Interesting.
sleuths.
That makes
Yeah.
sense then as to why that Stephanie woman in Glamour didn't. Because remember, I said she's referencing all of these theories, but she's not crediting anybody or naming people or showing screenshots of tweets or anything. I wonder if that's part of the motivation. Either she doesn't want to give them credit, or she wants to stay in control of the narrative, or she doesn't want to face any sort of potential ramifications.
Yeah, possibly. Who knows? I think she just was on one. She had an agenda with that.
But yeah, she was upset, and then her husband was going in the comments and being like, "Stop bullying a woman and criticizing her being a mom and all these things."
Wait, can I add a point to that? Actually, I will
Yeah,
say, you know, I try to stay away from a lot. I mean, I'm a very opinionated person in my real life, as you know, but as far as my career goes, I actually tend to try to stay away from a lot of very controversial stories for multiple reasons. But one of them is you really do now in this internet age open yourself up to extreme trolling and
yeah,
especially music journalists. So a lot of times now, like music reviewers, if they're doing like a pop album, like reviewing the new Taylor Swift album or Selena Gomez album, and they want to give it a bad review, some journalists are taking their name off because the doxing and harassment they will get from the fans just for giving a negative review to their favorite pop star, it's kind of out of control. And that's just a sad part of
yeah.
um, journalism now. And then I think that is really up to the media outlet to stand by their journalist and stand by the reporting, and not, fire someone because they're getting, backlash from Taylor Swift fans or Meghan Markle fans or whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, I always know when I'm gonna get a flood of heat, and then I'm just like, I don't censor my comments. I don't limit any of that stuff. I'm like, listen, give me all the engagement, pop off them in the comments all you want, and they do. Like when I said Beyonce had a rigged Grammy, or I thought Kendrick Lamar's performance was, a little too boring, at the Super Bowl, and like, oh my God, I got
Or suddenly you were a
annihilated.
racist or whatever because you didn't
Yeah,
like the Kendrick Lamar performance. I gotta say, a lot of the mainstream media journalists, I think in recent years, they're only just getting used to like getting trolled online and they
they're
don't
not used to it. Yeah,
they're not used to it and they can't handle it. They freak out because I think they also feel like, well, I'm behind my keyboard, I'm behind a big media outlet, nobody can touch me, I can say whatever I want. And it's like, really, you can't. And then people like you and even myself, I had a podcast for years. Um, we get used to it, so you know that it's coming, and then some of these people, they get it for the first time, they spin out like this Stephanie girl, and they're posting Instagram rants and everything. It's like, girl, just turn
yeah.
off your comments and people will move on in a few days. Just calm
Yeah,
down.
or just don't go on Instagram, like, it's fine,
Yeah.
like, but then
You
she,
don't
like,
have to be on social media.
she continued to double down on her stories about, like, what her position, and then I'm like, "Now you're just attracting this," like, and I get it, like, when people are new to getting heat and criticism online, like, it can be jarring, and you really are kind of like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" Um, and I've even had, like, conversations where I'm like, I probably it's probably not normal or healthy to be, like, so just casual and used to it as I am at this point, like, it's really not healthy, but, like, I just to me, it really doesn't like, I'm like,
Well,
"What?
you
I'm
you have
misogynist,
to
I'm racist, I'm all what?" You know?
you have to be like that or else it'll consume you and, you'll wanna jump off a building because it's horrible, the trolling that you get.
Yeah,
So you actually, like, have to have that. And also, like, back to the glamour editor, whatever her name is, and how we're like, oh, she keeps going back on social media. The thing is, they low key kind of love it if they keep
they
doing
love it.
that because the secret about a lot of mainstream media journalists that are in the entertainment slash sort of celebrity pop culture part is that they all secretly like want to be like they all want to be like an e-news host or a celebrity or a reality star or whatever, and they just like didn't have it to be able to get
Yeah,
there, so they write about the people that do that and they secretly always want to be in the spotlight. Like the amount of fucking people that I meet in the industry that are like that, or that you look at their background and it's like, oh, they were trying to be like a stand-up comedian, or they're out here like shopping their book deal, or they're trying to write a TV show, or they're trying to do modeling on Instagram. Like they all kind of like want it secretly.
yeah. It feeds the ego, you know?
Mm,
And so I think
yes.
there's an element of that to it that and listen, and as we know, it's a hard crash when they stop talking about you, whether it's a flood of negative comments, like you don't suddenly get your mental health back. You're like, wait, why have they stopped talking about me? Like, well, you then start to get that FOMO, and it's a weird mind fuck, and it really does play with your ego. And it's interesting to watch other people go through it, Like I said, I've just become so immune to it, and I just kind of I'm like, what am I today? Racist, homophobic, transphobic, misogynist? Like, what are we gonna call me today? You know?
I
I'm like,
mean,
what's the term of the day?
my podcast was out at the height of like the cancel culture stuff. So when I was
Yeah,
like, actually, men aren't women, or like, maybe we shouldn't force everybody to get, let if people want to get vaccinated, let them. Maybe just don't like, force them and take away all their rights. If that, I was like, the worst thing under the sun. And now you flash forward to where we are, and everything I said is just like common conversation. It's like, okay, but do I get an apology? No. Oh,
it's
well.
interesting how much the culture shifted in the last 5 years.
It's
Like,
crazy.
truly,
I
yeah,
mean, it felt like when we were in it, I'm like, wow, like this is never going to end. And now
yeah.
it's like completely ended. I'm like, oh, okay, wow. All right, here we are.
And those independent voices have now kind of come through the fog and have like now are the trusted sources of media for people now. I think people were so tired of having to walk on eggshells and be careful about what they said and like not be honest to, their own original thoughts. Cause like the reality is like you're gonna have thoughts that are maybe gonna be ignorant and that are maybe gonna be wrong and that are maybe gonna offend people unintentionally, and it's okay to have those thoughts because that's what then fosters the dialogue, and then we have that conversation and you either learn and grow through that, or your position shifts or doesn't shift or whatever. But I think those are the conversations that are necessary and healthy, and the fact that we weren't able to have that made people feel so like suffocated in their own thoughts that like it just has now bubbled over, and now people are so tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like I said, I'm really independent. So I kind of think it's swinging like too far in the other direction where some people are just
Yeah,
being like mean and crazy for like no reason. It's like, okay, calm
unnecessary. Yeah,
down. Yeah, it's like, I get that we couldn't say these things before and it was frustrating, but you don't need to like take it to this level. Just be fucking normal. Like, is it that
yeah.
hard to be a normal
Yeah,
person?
it is
Apparently it is.
frustrating sometimes. Yeah, because then I see people and they say things or they use certain terms that I'm just like, but we don't really need to go that hard. We don't need to go
Yeah.
that far because then now you're just making it look like, so then when you have people that are like, oh, it's all rooted in hatred or it's all rooted in this or that, like all you're doing is like further validating their argument and further like, not bringing us back to that common ground place again.
100%.
We'll see what happens. Is there anything you want to promote or anywhere you want to direct people? I mean, you're
Yes,
not
guys.
single, you have a boyfriend now, you don't have a podcast anymore. Like, what are you promoting?
I know. Well, it's so funny, this whole conversation we've had. Like, I've just, I moved to the US last year, and it's just been nice being out of the loop of like, just people attacking you for your opinions and all up in your fucking business and making threads about you on Reddit. Like, it's just been really nice to have a break. Maybe I'll come back to it one day, but for now I'm enjoying the break. But I do have my podcast on Patreon. So just follow me on Instagram at unpopularjp. And, I post the links to my Patreons there. I just do a lot of like housewives recaps and stuff about my real life, sometimes my takes on pop culture and gossip. But it's pretty casual. It's just like a small group of supporters that I have. And yeah, I just post my takes on Instagram all day. So get everything there.
All right, there you go. All right. Thank you, Jacques. Thank you for coming back. Guys, you can follow me at Just Plain Zack. Follow the podcast at No Filter with Zack. Subscribe. We're on the track to hit 100K on YouTube. We're almost there. We're getting there slowly but surely. But if you want to follow on Instagram at No Filter with Zack, or you can follow me personally at Just Plain Zack all over the internet. We stream live No Filter with Zack Peter Monday through Friday, first thing in the morning on YouTube and available on all podcast platforms. So be sure to leave a review, drop some love, hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.